On an evening in early December 2018, the young CEO of a cryptocurrency exchange reportedly dies while on his honeymoon in India. This death is not announced to customers for another month, and when they're told Gerald Cotten is the only person to hold the passwords to their funds, conspiracy theories grow, leaving some to wonder, could Gerald Cotten still be alive?
Honeymoon, moving the body, all the missing money. It was like, but what happened?
A Death in Cryptoland. Available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is a CBC podcast.
I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud, and this is Pop Chat. This week, we are talking about a new slang word that reignited the generation wars between millennials and Gen Zs. What's cheugy? Are you cheugy? Am I cheugy? Plus, one of the most popular memes of all time becomes an NFT. What does that mean? For one thing, it means you can't just avoid talking about NFTs. I'm sorry to say, it is time to do that. And as always, we will drop something in the group chat. We'll share what we've been watching, reading, or listening to this week. So let's do it. Hi, pals, and welcome to the show. With me today, we have Hussein Kesvani, writer, podcaster, professional shitposter. Hello, Hussein.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm okay. It's Ramadan at the moment. Well, so I've just broken my fast, and when the caffeine hits, it's a great feeling. So I'm feeling okay, right? I'm feeling pretty good right now.
Because what I was gonna say is that our next guest is Sarah Hagi, writer, Twitter legend. Hello, Sarah.
Hey, I'm Hussein's in the future. I'm still fasting, so I'm positively loopy here.
But
this
here's
is a special Ramadan episode of Pop Chat.
It's an all-Muslim episode of Pop Chat. That's what's going on here.
This is what we call, can I say creeping Sharia?
You can absolutely say creeping Sharia on this podcast. I have a lot of room for that. We got to start by talking about TikTok, and I love this for all of us. So at the end of March, this woman, Haley Kane, a 24-year-old copywriter in LA, popularized a term, and the term is cheugy. And it's a term I can't say without laughing. So instead of me explaining it, let's hear her saying what cheugy is.
Okay, TikTok, I have a new word for you that my friends and I use that you clearly are all in need of. The word, my friends, is cheugy, okay? It's the opposite of trendy, stylish in middle school and high school, maybe not. Timelines don't really matter, but it's no longer in style. It's used when someone follows these out-of-date trends or something falls into that category. Some examples. First of all, graphic tees and hats, phrases on clothing, cheugy. Herbal Essence shampoo, cheugy. Or people will say things like, this is millennial, or girl boss energy. All of these terms are pointing to the same thing, cheugy, the word you never knew you needed.
Okay, first of all, Herbal Essences doesn't need this. Like, Herbal Essences is fine. It is a brand that exists. Some people use it on their bodies. But the whole thing triggered me, and I need your help in understanding why. Because I've seen the term cheugy all over my feeds. I know it's directed at millennials. I feel like I am cheugy. I feel like some part of my vibe communicates cheuginess. And we gotta dig a little bit deeper into this. Sarah, I'm going to start with you. Can you help me understand, what does cheugy mean? Where does it come from?
Unfortunately, I will explain it. First of all, nothing I do is cheugy. I'm too cool. Second of all, it originated on TikTok by this user who, according to a piece in the New York Times, said it originated in her high school in Beverly Hills. And it kind of encompasses basic in a sense, but not quite there, because it's not necessarily something you're looking down on or that is, uniformly bad or embarrassing. From what I interpret, it kind of falls into the realm of being common or overdone. So some of the examples are like, those Sorel boots with the fur on the side, It's honestly, it seems like a lot of practical things are kind of chuggy, but that's just me. And it does seem like it's like very common, like, to be completely honest, like white people things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was what I got from chuggy. I think I do feel like I'm a bit old for it, but that's what I understand.
I was gonna say, Hussein, like, is it the stuff or is it the posting about it that's chuggy? Like, let's unpack what the chug is a bit, because like, give me a list of chuggy things. Is it just like posting about those boots, or is it owning them to begin with?
I asked a few people what chuggy was because I hadn't heard this in like my in the UK. Like I've seen no one from like the UK using this term, so right now it's a very sort of like Americanized.
That's because the UK is a bit chuggy, to be honest. But anyway,
yeah,
continue.
that could be, I mean, yeah, that could be it too. But so I asked a bunch. So obviously you have like examples that were used on like the graphics of like various explainer articles, and they range from like Minions and Uggs boots to college fraternities, Pinterest, girl boss related stuff, rosé. I asked a few like young people in my life what they thought chuggy was, and it also ranged from Harry Potter and other 2000s franchises, emo fringes, checkered Vans, which I was very confused about because I thought checkered Vans were like back in now, and also using any sort of filter on Instagram, but in particular VSCO filters.
Oh. Okay, fine.
Haggy made an expression. She was like, "Oh, I might be a little bit chuggy."
I mean, who's not using a filter? You're telling me you're posting stuff and not slapping the Paris filter on your wrinkled face?
Well, here's what I found interesting. It wasn't like the Instagram stock filters. It was VSCO filters, right?
Okay, well, that's fair. That's fair.
So it's the idea of like downloading like additional software or additional apps with like filters on them. And I guess the idea, when I was trying to kind of synthesize it all together, was this idea of when it's not trying hard to do stuff, but it's showing that you're trying hard to do stuff.
Right.
So it's kind of more the exertion of the concern of how you appear to other people rather than how you actually appear to other people.
See, like, that's like that when you explain it like that, I'm like, oh, that's not a new concept, because like I feel like every generation has one where we label a previous generation's behavior as, well, whatever, you know, like we have other words for it. You know, Haggy, earlier you used the word basic, and it's like,
poser.
Yeah, like rose gold anything is like a bit basic, and now maybe it's like a bit chuggy. Is there an equivalent word, Haggy, for millennials and Gen Xers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of seeing a trend be passé, because a lot of people are kind of doing it in a sense. Like, there was a time when the worst thing in the world was to be a poser. And based on what Hussein was just saying, it kind of feels like you're a poser. Like, you're doing things because you're putting too much thought into things, is what it sounds like. It's like this level of earnestness that's like uncool almost.
I mean, what I don't like about this, Hussein, is that we spent all this time, you know, cultivating an internet universe where, like, I would like to be seen by my friends, and I would like to be seen in a certain light. And like, you know, maybe like I like to put a little bit of effort into what that presentation is. And sometimes that involves filters, and sometimes that involves me be like, I'm going to go get a hat that I think makes me look cool. Not this hat, but like a different hat. And there's something to the fact that we all live our social lives online. So is trying at all now uncool? Is that where we are?
Well, I think you're actually right in the sense of like, we've always made fun of previous generations for like appearing to try too hard. Right?
Yeah.
Or like trying to kind of like impress other generations. So in a lot of ways, like I think the reason why chuggy hits so hard with like some millennials is because, yeah, and again, this is all just like speculation, but I sort of wonder whether it hits a particular kind of millennial who's sort of like at an age where they kind of remember what it was like when they were the cool kids online.
Yes.
And there's this kind of like reckoning with this idea that, oh, I'm getting older and now I'm like, you know, I'm not the cool kid online that I used to be. I'm no longer like MySpace famous or Facebook famous or whatever. You know, and that can kind of like instill an identity crisis among kind of some people, especially when the people who are calling you like a lame tryhard are like the new cool kids of TikTok who know how to use the app really well. But again, it's like a cyclical like thing, right? The only kind of difference that I was thinking about before coming on was the idea that like you know, the people who know about this term cheugy, I don't know how like widespread it will be. Maybe it's going to become huge. Maybe it might just be one of those like niche terms which kind of like dies out after a couple of months. But it's known among kind of millennials who are still in the content making business, or like who are still kind of primarily making content, whether that's like for brands or whether that's like podcasting and stuff. And it's in response to another generation of content creators who are making stuff for TikTok, or they're making stuff for like younger and like newer social media platforms. So really, I think a lot of this is like a contest between two generations of content creators who are making stuff for a very small number of like the same platforms, rather than it having being like kind of separated by like age or demographic and stuff.
Well, actually, to that end, Haggy, like, you know, it starts off as a harmless, relatively small TikTok trend, but then like a few weeks later, it's in the New York Times and is being talked about everywhere. And like the people that it's hitting with, as Hussein said, are millennials who are like, oh, we have feelings about this. Why is it that millennials are kind of destined to have feelings about these things?
I mean, I think there's
Because they're a bit
lot.
cheugy?
Yeah, I think, you know, at our core, the things we love are chug, you know? Chugged out, bro. You know, I think it really strikes a chord for us because millennials of any age, you know, be it like younger millennials to older ones who are like veering on Gen X, the internet wasn't the same. Like, you know, we didn't have this far reach for our discussions about what was cool and what was lame. Like, this is just like a generational thing that happens with all generations that's just amplified in this insane way because things like TikTok and like social media is just a whole other beast now. It's just like this new way to talk about what young people consider cringe. And I don't think our generation can really handle that because we've been at the forefront of online discussions and now we're not. And there's this whole other generation that is kind of leading the way. And now we're like, wait a second, you're telling me Twitter isn't cool? It's like, no, it's never been cool. Like, it's not cool. We're not cool anymore. Let the teens have their fun. I'm still cool, but I mean, like, I do think
everybody else, yeah,
Yeah.
suffering. I get that. I have to say that like some of the things that are being labeled cheugy, Hussein, like maybe this is what I'm struggling with, is that, you know, to a certain extent, I can understand, I don't know, Checkered Vans being labeled cheugy. That's fine. I
don't know. I would disagree with that. I feel like I've been tempted to buy a new pair of Checkered Vans for a long time, and this really kind of made me
really
question.
put a wrench in this. Well, listen, I can understand the idea that like this is a trend that belonged to a past time, but Herbal Essences shampoo, like,
yeah, you know, I understand that being cheugy, to be honest. That's like the one thing I understand being cheugy. It's like, that was like the shampoo of our time. I've got the urge. You know, there was those very inappropriate commercials that we all remember. And, you know, it's like now it's like, it's kind of like the smell of hair. Like if you smell someone's hair on like the subway, it's like, it smells like Herbal Essences or Fructis. And that's cheugy to me. And I think it's like Gen Z knows there's other shampoos and we're like, what? Herbal Essence isn't cool. It's cheugy. I totally is cheugy. Honestly, I think I'm a bit of a cheugy expert now.
I mean, part of all this is sort of also internet culture reporting and how, as it's sort of become much more like rightly accepted as like an important thing to cover, you know, these kind of like discourses and conversations about like what young people who use the internet, like how they feel about not only their time online, but how they feel about other generations, that's going to become, you know, that's not something that we can really like ignore anymore, right? Like to go back to like a point I was making in a couple of moments ago about how social media used to be. Like there was a time when you could kind of call your parents cringe, or you could call your parents' generation cringe, and it was like very unlikely that they would find out, right? Because
or
social
care.
media was, or even care about it.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, it would be something, you know, you could kind of be like angsty and sincere online, and like that wasn't something that would be kind of really cringy. But now, you know, you think about, you know, now it's kind of like a nightmare situation if you're even like the remotest part sincere on the internet, right? It's like, I don't think there's like a lot of people who would do that. And I guess there are like questions about, whether being sincere online is chuggy or not. And again, I'm no expert on what's chuggy or what isn't, so that's gonna have to be deferred to Sarah as well. But yeah, I think like generally I think a lot of these conversations come out of this place of the fact that like, even though you have various like generations who are actively using social media quite regularly and we've accepted it as a part of everyday life, the fact that we're only kind of really on a very limited number of platforms where all of us can like watch each other and all our content is sort of like reactions of other people's content or other generations' content, this stuff somehow becomes much more magnified and deemed to be like more important than maybe it actually is.
Mm-hmm. And to that end, I think we're gonna end this segment by each of us naming a musical artist who we believe being a fan of makes you a bit chuggy. I'm gonna go first and say I think if you're a Dave Matthews Band fan, it's a bit chuggy. Haggy, what about you?
I don't think the people who came up with chuggy know what the Dave Matthews Band is. I think if you like Maroon 5 or Bruno Mars, that's chuggy.
Hussein?
I was going to say John Mayer.
Oh, that's chugged. Chugged, bro.
Yeah.
John Mayer, Maroon 5, Dave Matthews Band. I got to take them off my playlist because they're now chuggy AF. Okay, we're going to wrap it here. Folks, if you have strong feelings about chuggy AF, I feel like saying AF is probably chuggy.
So chugged.
Yeah, absolutely is.
If you're listening and you have thoughts about what's chuggy in your life and what you're proud of, are you proud to be chugged out? Tweet us. We're at PopChatCBC.
Hi, I'm Sadaf.
And I'm Sarah.
And we are two very good friends who love gossip and celebrity scandals.
We're also the hosts of a new podcast called The Reheat. We're going to use our experience as cultural journalists to provide you with in-depth analysis of all the stories you remember and some that you don't.
Bennifer to Brangelina.
The time Princess Anne was almost kidnapped.
Ooh, and what about Whitney? Crack is whack, Sarah.
Listen to The Reheat on July 26th on the Frequency Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts.
I regret to inform you that the time has come where we gotta talk about NFTs. NFTs, aka non-fungible tokens, are basically a way to prove that you own the original of a piece of digital material. They've been around for a couple of years. They went mainstream in March because of this artist, Mike Winkelmann. His artist name is Beeple. Sold an NFT for a digital composite of 5,000 daily drawings at Christie's for a record-breaking $69.3 million. That is a preposterous amount of money. It is the third highest price achieved by living artists. And since that sale, we've seen this market explode. There's been a surprising array of digital offerings of things sold as NFTs. We're talking about GIFs. We're talking about sports highlights. We're talking about the very first tweet tweeted by Twitter founder Jack Dorsey. Video game skins, New York Times columns. There was a poster for Godzilla versus King Kong. It was sold as an NFT. People bought it. And now, Disaster Girl. Disaster Girl, if you're not familiar with that meme, is like it's this iconic photograph that has then become ubiquitous on the internet. It's this 4-year-old who's kind of smiling at the camera while this house burns behind her. And an NFT for this meme just sold for $500,000 US. So I want us to unpack this. I want us to unpack how NFTs work, and the Disaster Girl story is maybe the best, most graspable way into this, because it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around the idea of the original of something that is truly ubiquitous and available digitally everywhere can sell for that price. What is going on? Hussein, I'm having a stroke, maybe. Yeah. I feel like we need to start at the very beginning here.
Yeah.
Because I've been trying to avoid this conversation for as long as possible. What is happening?
I've spent a long day talking to different people to try to figure out what's going on.
Okay. Help me.
More time than I usually ever spend preparing on a podcast, and I'm still not like 100% confident that I've got it. So I try to explain. So I've written down some notes. I'm going to try to explain in like as simple terms as possible.
Okay.
So at like a very basic level, the NFT stands for a non-fungible token, and the fungible part is the most important kind of word there, because fungible basically means ability to replace. So a good example of this might be like if you had $1 in your pocket and it got like ripped or it got destroyed or something, in theory someone could replace that with like another $1, and its value and its ability to kind of like purchase would be about the same. The NFT by extension is not replaceable.
Yeah.
Now, NFTs in the context of digital art, this is where like blockchain kind of comes in. So you probably heard, like, you probably got all the PR emails about like, putting stuff on the blockchain, putting all these ridiculous things on the blockchain.
Yeah.
No one knowing what blockchain is. I'm not going to explain blockchain here because I don't really get it. And also it would just like deserve another podcast. But if you think about like cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum, the whole point is that you can like use the blockchain to kind of track where your coins are, and you can like keep it kind of secure, but it also like anonymizes the whole kind of process of owning a Bitcoin. So in that way, the NFT like operates on a blockchain. It can operate on a cryptocurrency blockchain. It can operate on other forms of blockchains. But because it's a digital like product or a digital object, it affords all the kind of like value metrics that you would add to cryptocurrency, which is why so many people who are interested in cryptocurrency look at NFTs as like another example, not only of like the future of finance being about crypto and blockchains, but also the idea of value. So. And in theory, like the reason why the NFT is such a kind of like weird concept, but also one that's so important, and the reason why we're talking about it today isn't because of like the inherent value people think digital art has, but rather what they think NFTs will do in terms of measuring what is valuable and what isn't. So effectively, it's a financial instrument that is being kind of experimented on through the means of digital art. And in this case, we're talking about like memes.
So then who are the people who are, I mean, like for the past 3 years or so, $174 million have been spent on NFTs. That's a lot of money. We got to talk about, who that appeals to. Like, who are the kinds of people who are like, yes, I will spend millions of dollars, or in the case of the Disaster Girl, $500,000 to own what they perceive as the original copy of something that is now digitally ubiquitous.
I mean, sometimes it's just like people who want like clout. It's like people who just want the idea of like being part of like the small moment of history. So if you own like, if there's like a NFT of a meme, and that's kind of, that meme is sort of deemed as like the original, then like you buying an NFT or buying a portion of an NFT means that you're kind of like part of its history. I think the financial world is really interested in NFTs, again, not because of the digital art that it's associated with at the moment, but what it offers in terms of financial transactions. So it's the idea that like in theory, as NFTs and NFT based technology becomes more ubiquitous, you can kind of perform transactions at a much faster rate without any of the kind of like brokerage or middlemen that are currently used even in like digital day trading and stuff, right? It makes the whole process faster. And for big corporations who like, make money off fast trades, this is obviously like something, or even like hedge funds and stuff, this is obviously something that's very valuable. So again, like NFTs are inherently like a speculative technology that is part of like a broader notion of like the speculative economy as a whole, right? And I think that's kind of where the ultimate value is. It's people kind of betting on the idea that blockchain technology is going to kind of become the technology of the future, and therefore anything kind of associated with it is immediately like hyped up and given this really arbitrarily high value, which can also like apply to other markets. Like we've seen it in like the art world and stuff as well. So it's not completely unprecedented, but the difference with this is that because there's so much going on, lots of the kind of like traditional gatekeepers of the art world and stuff have no idea like what is currently happening.
Well, so let's give a bit more context to the idea of this Disaster Girl meme being bought as an NFT. Sarah, like, there's been gifts that have been sold as NFTs. There's been albums. There have been 3D houses. But I want to talk about Disaster Girl because that one is the one that surprised me. So can you just explain to people what happened here?
Much like Hussein, I spent a good chunk of my day trying to understand this. I hate Pop Chat forever for making me know something I don't want to know. But when it comes to Disaster Girl, like it is an iconic meme that we've like, even if you can't picture it in your head right now, if you see it, even the least online person will be like, yeah, I've seen this girl smirking at the fire.
I have 5 copies of it on my phone somewhere because I just
yeah,
use it so
exactly.
often. Yeah.
You know, it's such a common meme, and I think, you know, she sold it for it was 180 Ethereum, which is roughly 500K US. She and her family split it seems, because her father took the photograph, and they will get 10% of the profits if it's resold. And from what I understand about this particular sale, it's about having the bragging rights of owning something. Like, yes, we see this image, it exists. Just like you can go into an art gallery or museum and see, you know, a painting. Yeah, you know it exists, but it doesn't belong to you. You can copy it. You can have a print of it. Someone can do an amazing rendition of it, or, you know, a really beautiful fake version of it. But no matter what, like, that isn't yours to own. So from my understanding, when it comes to NFTs, even if it is something that can technically be copied or that we've seen a million times before in the last, you know, whatever, 10 years, it's about the bragging rights. It's about you owning the original.
Well, so this is what I'm trying to, I guess, like, finally wrap my mind around is, are there significant bragging rights in this? And to whom is that worthy of bragging to? Because, you know, like, if I have a copy of the Mona Lisa hanging in my house, and people come and be like, we know that you don't own the OG Mona Lisa. It just doesn't make any sense. It's in the Louvre, bro. We know this. But if we sort of apply the same principle to Disaster Girl, say, and you walk around saying, I own the original Disaster Girl, I mean, I feel like there's more copies of Disaster Girl than there is of the Mona Lisa, and that's saying something. Because digitally speaking, I can just press the copy button on my phone, and I can create a new version of it that is, like, sitting in, you know, in my camera roll. And so, like, what does, like, how significant are these bragging rights, and, like, to whom is that a brag?
I think it's a brag for the people who are really into this, like the people who are into NFT art. Like, I mean, like, we know the Mona Lisa has value because for our entire lives, we were told that's the most famous painting in the world, the most valuable piece of art you can imagine. And that's why it's been replicated so many times, you know? Again, like, someone can probably paint the Mona Lisa at this point exactly how Da Vinci, exactly how, you know, Leonardo da Vinci painted it, but it still won't be the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
I think they're betting on the future worth of what NFTs will become. Like, this person who bought it for $500,000, if they believe, and I'm sure they do, that NFTs will be significant and increase in their significance 10 years from now, they can be like, you know, I actually bought Disaster Girl for $500,000. It's the same as buying art.
But Hussein, where it might be different is that, like, I can display my copy of the Mona Lisa, even if it's fake.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that you can display your ownership of a meme in the same way, right? Like, you'd have to, like, literally go around and be like, you know what I fucking own is the original meme. And, like, that feels like an unhinged thing to do.
Well, yes and no. I think that, like, maybe they're kind of betting on a future where if everything does kind of go on blockchain, for example, but, like, you can find the people who own particular digital objects, right?
Okay.
So that's, like, one possible, like, answer to it. The other is kind of, like, agreeing with Sarah in terms of a lot of this is about, like, speculation. But I would sort of extend that a bit further, and I would say that, like, you know, so you mentioned in the intro about, like, the artist Beeple, like, selling his work for $69.3 million, right?
Yes.
What's worth noting is that the person who bought it, or the group that bought it, didn't buy it with, like, cash. They bought it with Bitcoin, or they bought it with, like, a Bitcoin or cryptocurrency portfolio, right? And, you know, I won't go into, like, too much about how, like, cryptocurrency portfolios work. But again, this is also a currency which is, like, whose value is often dependent on very high levels of speculation. And we can kind of see that with, like, Elon Musk kind of arbitrarily pushing up the value of, like, Dogecoin, which is the original, like, meme coin, as in it was something that was designed to kind of almost satirize Bitcoin, right? So, like, all of a sudden you now have this, like, economy which is entirely built on speculation and speculative currency, buying speculatively valued objects on a network system, the blockchain, which is also kind of built on speculation as well. So you can kind of see how this becomes this very strange and confusing circle where everyone's kind of, like, betting on this technology, betting on this, like, very new but also, you know, quite this quite early technology. So I think that the kind of notion of ownership and the notion of, like, bragging rights and stuff, that certainly plays a part in in the popularity of NFTs, but I think actually what's happening is something a lot bigger, which is really like a reorientation of finance at a time of like late capitalism, where the kind of instructive thing is that no one really knows how to value things anymore, or like what constitutes value, right?
I mean, the closest analogy that I can think of is, you know, why don't we use like the master's analogy in music, which is like, you know, you record a copy of an album, you own the original masters of it, which is to say you have the right to benefit from every future, future copy of it. So like the copies that are sold on iTunes, the copies that are sold, the copies that are streamed on Spotify. This isn't the same thing. So like we're not yet looking at a world where owning the original image of something, owning the original Beeple work of art gives you the right to benefit from all future licensing of it. So I'm struggling to understand the larger economic implications of it. This can go to either one of you.
I mean, I think it like so much of how we value things has kind of been leading up to this in a sense. Like we have all these companies that haven't turned a profit that are worth billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's just kind of where we're going at that sense, where it's like, not to get like too philosophical, which is like a funny, rich coming from me, I'll say that much. But it's like, you know, what's the difference between something physical and something digital? It's kind of breaking that barrier almost in a sense of like, you know, like I remember playing games online when I was a kid, for example. I mean, we see this on our phones now, but like where you're playing with other people and you could just buy stuff to use digitally in a game. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's not a real thing. And I'm not actually doing a real thing. And none of this means anything, but I'm spending money on this thing that doesn't exist to further my weird game. And I do think that like naturally, of course, we're going to be into something like NFTs where it's not a real thing that doesn't actually exist, but now it has value because it might be super valuable at some point.
I sort of wonder whether like it reflects this broader thing of like not actually being, or like a generation that's almost kind of shut off to any kind of material ownership in the real world, right? So like the fact that it's really hard to buy your own house, it's really hard to start your own family, it's really like expensive to kind of do any type of long-term planning in a very precarious and unstable economy. So now like you have this generation who have sort of accepted that we're not really going to be able to own anything material in the future, but we might be able to own stuff digitally. And the idea of just being able to own something might absurdly be quite empowering. And, you know, and as Sarah kind of mentioned with game stuff, like one of the reasons why like being able to use digital currency in a game to kind of like, you know, optimize your character or optimize your Avi and stuff like that was such a kind of instructive moment for like generations playing online games for the first time, because it did really feel like the sense of like sovereignty and empowerment that was supposed to reflect adulthood, but with the promises of adulthood rejecting that, then like that logic kind of continues. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does. But like, okay, so can we just try to, I guess, project outwards from that then and try to imagine the future of NFTs in maybe like a couple years from now? Is it, because it feels like it's something that is escalating, that's kind of taking off, maybe because of that massive $69.3 million purchase, but also it feels like there's a future here where we just spend more and more time in this world.
Yeah, I think, so I was thinking about this a little bit, and like, obviously one answer is that it could basically go anywhere, and any sort of like obscure meme or any type of like very niche meme, for example, could be minted into an NFT and kind of like sold at value in kind of like internal markets or black markets. But one thing which a tech person had mentioned to me when I spoke to them today was the fact that actually like the NFTs and digital ownership, especially of like pictures and stuff, can be very dangerous when we think about it in the context of things like revenge porn, for example, where, you know, if you kind of have like a compromising picture or a video and you kind of mint that into an NFT, where that then gets sold to an anonymous buyer on like a anonymous blockchain, and you can't really get rid of it, i.e. it'll always exist in some form, and you can't use any type of like European Union law or any sort of like international law to kind of like take it down, or like Google's right to forget and stuff like that. That can become very, very dangerous, especially when you kind of factor that into things like deep fakes and stuff like that, right?
Well, I didn't know we're doing smart answers.
To that end, do you think let's do smart answers again? To that end, do you think that NFTs will go mainstream, or will they just kind of continue to be this like niche commodity for niche people who would like to own a piece of, digital history, but have no way of displaying it?
I think that it's going to become, so my personal opinion is that aspect of like people wanting to own digital stuff or digital products, that's going to I think that will it will still exist in some form, but it'll be like one of those sort of GameStop moments where people talk about it nonstop for like a month and then it just sort of vanishes afterwards. But I think that the kind of broader stuff around NFT and in terms of like the technology that it offers big finance and like hedge funds and, fintech organizations, like that stuff will kind of continue to stay because again, I really do think that like the value that they see in NFTs really does come from like its ability to like process transactions. And again, it's also like one thing I was thinking about this coming in was like, it's also like a really great instrument to do money laundering. So I reckon we'll see like a few instances of that.
Exciting.
Okay, now we're talking. I honestly, I do agree. And also I think that like, cryptocurrency has becoming more and more mainstream, but I don't think it's something that an everyday person will be really that into for a very long time. Like to me, it's kind of like there is a pretty huge barrier to entry. There's a lot to understand. Like I've been hearing about this for the last like 10 years or so. And I still feel like I don't have a grasp on it. And I'm someone who's, online literate and like has read it's always been like floating around. It's always been in my orbit. And I really just don't see people latching onto it in a huge way. And I totally agree. I think it's something that the mainstream will be talking about for a very long time, but those who are really in it will continue valuing this kind of thing. And I think it'll have its own kind of world, its own existence.
Well, I gotta tell you, not only am I a skeptic, but this is probably the longest I've ever had to talk about NFTs, and will continue to be the case until someone mints as an NFT the Vine of the girl who goes, "Look at all these chickens," in which case I'm back in the conversation and I might empty my life savings to own that original one. And if folks would like to let us know, what memes they'd be like, okay, I'll get into this NFT business. I'd like to buy the original copy of this. Tweet us your thoughts. We are at PopChatCBC. All right, so before we get on out of here, we're going to drop something in the group chat. It'd be a delight for me to hear what you have been watching or reading or listening to this week. Haggy, let us begin with you. What would you like to drop in the group chat?
Well, I have a bit of a brag here.
Ooh.
I read a book.
Wow. In this economy?
I read a book, guys, from beginning to end. So this is a book that it won't come out until July. So that's another brag.
Wow.
But so I got sent this book and I read it and I was very excited to read it because it is from the author of American War, which is a very popular book that is beloved by many. Oh my God, you have it? You have it on your book? Well, yeah, it's a
let us display American
instant
War.
Classic.
Classic, absolutely.
So the author, Omar El-Akkad, he wrote a new book called What Strange Paradise. And I got to tell you, it's one of those books where you start it and your heart's just breaking and it just continues breaking until the very end.
Oh, gosh.
And you're left to sit with this kind of like look at yourself in this way. And without spoiling it, it's about a Syrian refugee, a young boy who's on a ship. It gets shipwrecked on a European island. And this girl from the island, it's like a resort town, tries to help him get to safety because one of like the army that's there to kind of corral refugees, they're quite cruel and she doesn't want him to go there. So it is kind of like a Peter Pan story. It really follows the Peter Pan framework of storytelling. And it is, it's just one of those books that you read it and you're like instant classic, instantly great.
Amazing.
I've been thinking about it since I finished it this weekend and like, I just like, I want to hug someone. You know what I mean? It's like one of those books where you're like, oh my God, humanity. It's just so hard being alive and everything's so messed up. But it really, I don't know. It's just fantastic. And it comes out July 20th. And I think you could pre-order it. It's a good, I don't know if it's not a beach read. I'll tell you that much. But it is really fantastic and it's quite short. So maybe that's not a brag that I read it. It's like 225 pages.
No, that's a brag. That qualifies in a pandemic, bruh. That totally qualifies as a brag.
Amazing.
For me, I'm dropping a podcast in the group chat. An episode of On Being, which is a podcast.
I love that.
I know, it's a podcast that I love in general. Krista Tippett is just like, you know, you want to hang out with Krista Tippett. You want to be like, Krista, let's just go out, have lunch, chat about life for a while. She did not actually host this particular episode, but Hanif Abdurraqib, who's been on the show before, he has a new book out, and he talks about his new book, talks about life, and I love listening to Hanif, and in this he just like talks a little bit about his writing process. He talks a little bit about the ways that he connects ideas that seem like disconnected or like not particularly related, and he's just like such a rich interview that I put it on and I started like cleaning the house and it felt like a breeze. Like it just like flew by because I was like, these are just good pals hanging out, talking about poetry, talking about writing. And so Hanif Abdurraqib on Being. And also, like, if you haven't heard On Being, just like, I don't know, enrich your life by listening to On Being with your girl Krista Tippett. Krista, come through anytime.
I don't know why it's so funny going, your girl Krista Tippett.
Your girl Krista Tippett, come through. Hussein, what about you? What would you like to drop in the group chat?
I just want to say that both are great recommendations. I really liked Omar El-Akkad's American War, and I'm really looking forward to. I was really happy when Sarah tweeted out that like there was a new book coming out. Mm-hmm. So I have also got a podcast. It's a podcast that's been going on for a few years. It's called Where Should We Begin with Esther Perel. Esther Perel is a psychotherapist who kind of specializes in like relationship counseling. So the episodes are kind of like intimate one-off sessions with couples who are like kind of going through various, like not always problems, but sometimes it's going through like challenging moments in their relationships, or they're sort of reassessing or assessing like decisions that they've made. The last episode that I listened to, which was in the car on the way here, was a episode about a cisgender couple, one who wanted to kind of pursue a polyamorous relationship and the other who had like reluctantly accepted it but wasn't kind of quite sure. But yeah, all the episodes are kind of really good, and I really like the way that like Esther Perel like really challenges both their kind of thinking and by extension how like her rolling commentary on like how we think about like what relationships and intimacy is.
Can I just say, like, Esther Perel is one of those writers who, you know, when she burst on the scene, when Mating in Captivity came out, and she's kind of was like being interviewed in every place that there was to interview, I immediately gravitated towards the way that she explains, you know, relational ideas and like ideas about being in a relationship, because she's very good at like finding the one thing that someone says and kind of reframing it to be like, oh, I don't understand why you would even think about it this way. Yeah. And then once you like are introduced to how Esther Perel frames something, you're like, oh, that's the only way to see it now. Like there is no other way. And so I love that podcast. I'm not sure if I've heard that particular episode, so I'm gonna go back and listen to it. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Damn it. I've honestly only heard about her in like the last couple months, and now I hear her name everywhere.
She's amazing.
So I think it's a sign.
I spend way too much time just like watching YouTube clips of her like blowing interviewers' minds. They'll ask her a question, and then she'll just be like, no, you're thinking about it all wrong. And it's just like, it's magical to see.
Yeah, that sounds a little stressful. It sounds like it'll make me think too hard about my own self.
It will.
Which is not something I want to do.
Well, listen, we come to Pop Chat to think. We put on our thinking hat. So thank you for both of you for helping me think through some big stuff today. Appreciate your time.
Oh, this is the best. So much fun. You know, great Ramadan episode.
What a time. 2
out of the 3 of the suggestions were a bit creeping Sharia.
Big facts. It's true. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. We're at PopChatCBC. There you can find links to all of these amazing recommendations. And of course, follow us everywhere you get your podcasts so that you don't miss a single episode. Thank you for joining us today on Pop Chat. This is the show where we help make sense of the cultural drama that is blowing up the internet. I'd like to thank our PopChat team, our showrunner, Emil Niazi, producer, Sarah Clayton, coordinating producer, Glory Omateo. Plus, our senior producer is Tina Verma. Our executive producer is Arif Nurani. I'm your host, Alamin Abdul Mahmoud. Join us again next week.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.